everybody, and welcome. I'm Elizabeth Coffer-Bush. I'm co-director of the Center for American Studies here at Christopher Newport University. And thank you for celebrating Constitution Day and Citizenship Day with us. It's actually called both. This day is observed each year on September 17th to commemorate the signing of the Constitution. Fun fact, it's the 232nd anniversary of the Constitution. That says something, yeah. That's probably worth some applause. Not the 232 years, but that I knew that fact, I think. Which was September 17, 1787. And the purpose is to recognize all who, by coming of age by naturalization, have become citizens. So it also recognizes citizens of this country. The commemoration had its origin in 1940, and then in 1952, they changed the law to commemorate the signing of the Constitution. And then in 2004, Senator Byrd wanted to bolster the day, and they changed the designation to be officially Constitution Day and Citizenship Day, and they required institutions receiving public funding to commemorate the day. And that's one reason, not the only reason, why we celebrate here today. So every educational institution that receives some sort of federal funds commemorates the day. So we at the center have started doing debates to commemorate because we think it's important to recognize that intelligent people can disagree with each other, and one of the hallmarks of a free republic is that we have the right to share our opinions and dispute them with one another in a civil manner, though sometimes it may seem like that doesn't happen. And as an example of that, we've invited Mr. Lincoln and President Lincoln, and Judge Douglas to have a conversation on the subject. So we have two historical interpreters today. Tim Connors has performed Stephen Douglas for more than 11 years and has been honored to perform at all 7 of the debate sites during the 2008 anniversary of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. He performed at locations across the country, including the Harold Washington Library in Chicago, the Gerald Ford Presidential Library in Grand Rapids, and many, many others. George Buss has, for over 30 years, entertained and educated a variety of audiences as Lincoln, and some of you who may have visited the Mariners Museum may recognize him. He commemorates the Battle of Hampton Roads every year here. He's done that for several years now. And from the time he was little in the 1960s, he already had a keen interest in Abraham Lincoln and became familiar with his mannerisms. And his tall, thin, bearded appearance, in and out of costume, made him a great interpreter. And I will say, first of all, before we get started, if everyone could silence or turn off their phones. Secondly, I would ask you to stay for the entirety of the performance. And thirdly, I would like you to know that our guests are very willing to take pictures with you after the event, so if anyone wants to stick around. So they will have their conversation, we will have some question and answers, and then anyone who'd like to take pictures afterwards, please feel free to, and please feel free to tweet it out. All right, so without further ado, I think I hear President Lincoln and Judge Douglas back here, maybe? Maybe. They should be coming. Here we go.
I'm dear. Hello, Christopher Newport University. Thank you. That's what I'm talking about.
Afternoon. Appreciate that so much. Now, it's a pleasure to join you here this afternoon. You see, there's some fond memories of this part of Virginia, but the notion of me to appear on the platform with Judge Douglas, well, it's been 100. Well, figures have never been that easy for me. But you know, my old law partner, Billy Herndon, could tell you stories. But you know, folks didn't abide Bill and tell us stories. You see, he'd get going and he'd add a little spice and a little color, and by the time he was done, folks would say, "Go on, Billy, go on." But Billy would go on. But Senator Douglas is joining us this afternoon. His presence will add a little dignity to the occasion and probably stop me from telling you very many stories.
What we are witnessing, ladies and gentlemen, is a dose of the famed Lincoln humility. A man as revered as President Lincoln, a man who's given his name to countless schools, towns, and even the presidency itself, which many refer to as Lincoln's chair. That man needs no one else to lend dignity to anywhere he may appear.
You are much too kind, Judge, but I'm reminded of another story.
If I may continue to make my point here. When we were debating across the great state of Illinois, I would often relay to the crowd that I once went into an establishment and found Mr. Lincoln actually working in that establishment that served whiskey. Ooh.
The judge speaks the truth, for I did work there. What he always fails to mention is that while I was always behind the bar, he was always very attentive on the other side of it.
I was sure he could not resist that response. And I made my second point. I'm sure we will hear more of Mr. Lincoln's storytelling ability.
Since we're talking about stories, I've become known over the years by the various books, magazines, newspapers, and now Blu-ray. But I didn't come here today to put the truth to or to deny any of those stories, but the notion of me as a teller of tales to make a point or to point out a principle. Well, I'm kind of proud of being remembered by that. And I've never denied my enjoyment speaking before a crowd like a gathering you've provided this afternoon, or a courtroom, or Cooper's Union Institute, or either one of those inaugurals. But I must say, Judge, you know me very well.
Indeed I do.
Since you have mentioned the debates, it might be helpful if we discussed politics in the 1850s. It was a stormy time in our country's past. The sky above this great land was cloudy with the controversy that divided us into hostile camps. Men were arguing whether lands west of the Missouri River should be slave or free. The judge and I were two of those men.
Now, it's been nearly 160 years ago that Lincoln and I debated over that United States Senate seat from Illinois. Need I remind you that at age 21, I was Illinois Secretary of State. At age 27, I was Justice on the Illinois Supreme Court. At age 30, I was a United States Congressman. By age 37, I was a United States Senator from Illinois. And at age 41, I was the leader of the National Democratic Party. I was considered for the presidential nomination for our party in 1852 and again in 1856 when the Buchanan supporters held out and got their man the nomination. But only after I agreed to withdraw my name after they had voted on the 16th ballot at convention. With that election behind me, I had the time, and with my considerable speaking talent, I was ready to begin the re-election campaign for my Illinois Senate seat in 1858. I believed that popular sovereignty should exist in our nation. The territories should be able to decide whether they are free or slave even before the state constitution. No questions asked. Let the people vote up or down. This antagonized President Buchanan, a Democrat himself, so much so that he actively worked against me in 1858.
There was, from the beginning, a flaw in the founding documents. It was compounded by the cobbled up mess of the compromises, part of which was the Fugitive Slave Act, but it was the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 that put the taste of politics in my mouth like I had never tasted it before. It was upsetting to the Democrats in the Senate that the possibility would exist that the balance of power might not be maintained as it always had been from the beginning. Always two states entering the Union, and always one slave, and always one free. And old Buck could President Buchanan did not want the boat rocked. He wanted to wait for Judge Roger B. Taney's decision on Dred Scott.
But they weren't afraid of working together to engineer my defeat at the hands of Lincoln. The national leadership of my own party, Buchanan and Taney, trying to bring about the defeat of their party's leader in the Senate. And despite being isolated by the party over my disagreements with Buchanan and the Democrats controlling both houses in Illinois, I was challenged by him, this upstart lawyer from Springfield, from that fledgling Republican Party.
The judge is correct. The judge was senator. I had a notion Senator Lincoln had a ring to it that I kind of liked. Then there was the other senator, Lyman Trumbull, a Democrat. He spoke on my behalf in August of 1858. There was Horace Greeley, publisher of the New York Tribune, where he'd seen our speeches in the summer of '58. And in an editorial said there ought to be a series of debates, saying something like, the prairies are on fire.
What's remarkable is that the Republicans had a state convention, even though senators were elected by the state legislators, not a direct vote of the people. Needless to say, his carefully prepared remarks at the state capitol in Springfield caused me concern. He is the strong man of his party. He is honest as he is shrewd. And if I beat him, my victory will be hardly won. Lincoln, I suspect these people would like to hear your opening remarks from the state capitol from June of 1858.
Without objection. Mr. Chairman and gentlemen of the convention, we could first know where we are and whether we're attending. We could better judge what to do and how to do it. We're now in the 5th year since the policy was initiated with the avowed object and confident promise of putting an end to slavery agitation. Under the operation of that policy, that agitation has not only not ceased, but has constantly augmented. In my opinion, it will not cease until a crisis shall be reached and passed. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to fall. I do not expect the House to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. Either the opponents of slavery will arrest the further spread of it and place it where the public mind shall be in the belief that it is in the course of ultimate extinction. Or its advocates will push it forward. It will come up like in all the states, old as well as new, north as well as south. Have we no tendency to the latter condition?
Shortly after that speech, Lincoln challenged me to a series of debates. If he had his way, we would have had dozens, perhaps 100 debates. No. You must remember, everyone knew who Stephen A. Douglas was at this time. Nobody knew him. Few people had any idea who he was. But during my campaign appearances, guess who kept showing up? Speaking before, speaking after, speaking the same day, speaking the day before or the day after. It was Mr. Lincoln. And when would it stop? So finally, I agreed to the debates in an effort to have him thwart him from dogging me across the state. Since we had already spoken in Chicago and Springfield, I said, Lincoln, the other 7 congressional districts would suffice.
Since I challenged the judge sent the ground rules. And while I am mentioning the judge, that reminds me of the time that we were both serving in the legislature back in Illinois, and a bill come before us to expand the judiciary, add some judge seats. And by the time the ink could be dry on that bill, making it law, guess who got themselves appointed to one of those judge seats? Stephen Douglas. So when I refer to him as judge, it's not necessarily a compliment. I just want it to serve as a reminder that I remember how he got that job. Now, I've gotten off track again. In these debates, friends, the judge set the rules so the first speaker would speak an hour. The second speaker, an hour and a half. And the first speaker would finish with a half-hour rejoinder. 3 hours all total. We would alternate the starts at each location, with the judge starting 4 times and me starting 3 times. And I would have to answer questions from the judge at the first debate. And I prepared so hard for that first debate that the Republican papers reported that when we was done, I had to be carried off in victory.
What are you talking about, Lincoln? You were unprepared. I had you running in circles, and you wasted my time. I caught you flat-footed, and the reason your friends had to carry you from the platform was because you were so beaten up by me.
Friends, you now see here before you the keen ability of Stephen Douglas to frame an argument and start with a horse chestnut and end up being a chestnut horse. Now, Senator.
Yes.
At Freeport, the second debate, I would have my first questions for you. And you've certainly got to remember that crowd.
Yes, I do. Estimates ran between 15 to 20,000 people gathered to each of us present our positions. I was worried, though, that I wouldn't get there to present my position. When I got to my carriage, I was shocked to find it smeared with foul excrement. And so, not appearing above the people, I walked proudly to the site. As I approached the stage on the platform to take my place, I was assaulted by a watermelon rind that hit me in the right shoulder. As you see, in those days, the debates were very important in the communities. People were very different then, and emotions ran strong and deep. After speaking for our allotted 3 hours, there were cries of, "Go on." There were, of course, in those days, fewer diversions and no instant analysis by a group of network talking heads.
It was that second question, friends, the Freeport question. Can the people of the United States territory, in any lawful wish against the citizens of the United States, exclude slavery from their limits prior to the formation of a state constitution?
I answer emphatically, as Mr. Lincoln has heard me answer 100 times from every stump in Illinois, that the people of a territory can exclude slavery from their legal limits prior to the formation of a state constitution. Mr. Lincoln has heard me argue that Nebraska bill over and over in 1854, 1855, and in 1856. And he has no right to pretend to be in doubt as to my position on that question.
You now have heard that question, the Freeport question. Stephen Douglas's answer is a Freeport doctrine. Much has been written on whether we knew the consequences of asking that question or the consequences of that answer. And some folks say the road to Civil War ran through Freeport. But that answer added fodder to the remaining debates, as well as the great issue of what did the founding fathers mean when they penned, "All men are created equal." When a man, as I said at Quincy in 1858, when a man works by the sweat of his brow but cannot eat the bread of his labor, to me, friends, is no democracy.
Mr. Lincoln, the written record is extensive on the subject. And with your last statement made right here, I take bold exception. Why, sir, I believe you are absolutely two-faced on the slavery question.
Judge Douglas, now if I had two faces, why would I wear this one?
Let's move on. At Alton, the seventh and final debate, and my health steadily declining, I could barely speak and be heard by the crowd. Lincoln illustrated the depth of his skills as a courtroom lawyer as he took the essence of these debates and created his closing remarks, if you will, to the masses assembled. Mr. Lincoln, favor us with those words with which you are now remembered.
Douglas says that upon the score of equality, slaves should be allowed to go into a new territory like other property. This is strictly logical if there is no difference between them and other property. That is the real issue. That is the issue that will continue in this country when these poor tongues of Judge Douglas and I will be silent. It is the eternal struggle between these two principles, right and wrong, throughout the world. They are the two principles that have stood face to face from the beginning of time and will ever continue to struggle. The one is the common right of humanity, and the other, the divine right of kings. It is the same principle in whatever shape it develops itself. It is the same spirit that says, you work and toil and earn bread, and I'll eat it. No matter in what shape it comes, whether from the mouth of a king who seeks to bestride the people of his own nation and live by the fruit of their labor, or from one race of men as an apology for enslaving another race. It is the same tyrannical principle. And so, the 7 debates closed. The fall election produced a narrow victory for the Democrats in Illinois, some 5,000 votes statewide. It was a narrow victory. But when the legislature met, as Senator Douglas said, they controlled the vote of the Senate, who would be senator. And so when they met, the votes were counted, the report was issued. Let's say Judge Douglas remains senator from Illinois, elected to his 3rd term.
My answer at the Freeport debate drove a wedge, though, in the Democratic Party, so that in 1860 there were 4 men vying for the presidency: Mr. Bell from Tennessee, Mr. Lincoln, myself as the nominee of the Democratic Party, and Buchanan's vice president, John C. Breckinridge, the choice of the Southern Democrats that bolted from the party.
The continued split in the Democrat Party would take me to the office of President of the United States. The dissolution of the Union was at hand. Threats of assassination arrived in Springfield, Illinois, even before I could take the oath. After our travel for 20 days, we arrived in Washington via Baltimore, and we had to come through at midnight at Pinkerton's request. There at the station in Washington, we met Galena, Illinois Congressman E.B. Washburn, and my law friend, Ward Hill Layman Hill. He had chosen to be my personal bodyguard, carrying knives, guns, and brass knuckles, all in the plural. So when Congressman Washburn reached for my hand at the platform, Hill hit him. And I said, "You can't hit him, it's Washburn." And we picked him up and dusted him off. Washburn was the only fellow that knew we was coming. It was him who had made the arrangements for our rooms at Willard Hotel. One of my earliest visitors was Senator Stephen A. Douglas of Illinois. He had come at his lovely wife's request.
Adele said to me in her most compelling voice that I've ever heard her say. She said, "Stephen, your president needs you."
The senator arrived at our door to our suite of rooms. I recognized his form immediately. Senator Douglas, my friend. They claimed I almost wrung his hand off at the wrist. I wiped some tears from my eyes. The visitors that were there all left the room, and he and I could speak earnestly and privately on this impending Civil War.
Lincoln, I don't want this war, but I see no other means to avert it. Lincoln, I have sons. You have sons. There are so many boys. But I believe we must save the Union. And if it must come, then it will be settled on the field of battle. You must, Lincoln, reinforce the forts around the city of Washington. But please, bring them from New York and Massachusetts, from the great Northeast, where the beliefs are not a cross purpose of ours.
Diplomacy has failed, Senator. I am prepared to call 75,000 troops to quell this secession.
Quell? 75,000? Quell? You need to have over 250,000 troops. Lincoln!
Then there came the inaugural address. And Senator Douglas, from the floor of the Senate the next day, his health is continuing to decline as it had from the election of 1858 and his defeat for the presidency in 1860. But without pause, he agreed to go on a speaking tour to as many friends that he could speak to avoid secession. It proved futile, but the support assured me of some unity in the North. And after nearly 2 months, he arrived back in Illinois, and the people there again called the name of Douglas. It is altogether fitting and proper, friends, that you should hear the remarks of his last major address as requested and given to a joint session of the Illinois legislature. And I'll remind you the date of these remarks was April 25th, 1861. You all now know this speech as Save the Flag.
Mr. Speaker, and gentlemen of the Senate and House of Representatives, I am not insensible to the patriotic motives which have prompted you to do me the honor to invite me to address you on this momentous issues now presented in the condition of our country. With a heart filled with sadness and grief, I proceed to comply with your request. For the first time since the adoption of the federal Constitution, a widespread conspiracy exists to destroy the best government the Son of Heaven ever shed its rays upon. Hostile armies are now marching upon the federal capital with a view of planting a revolutionary flag upon its dome, seizing the National Archives, taking captive the president elected by the votes of the people, and holding him in the hands of secessionists and disunionists. A war of aggression and extermination is being waged against the government established by our fathers. You may think that I am drawing a picture that is overwrought. No man who has spent the last week in the city of Washington will believe that I have done justice to it. You have all the elements of the French Revolution surrounding the capital now, and threatening it with its terrors. Not only is our constitutional government to be stricken down, not only is our flag to be blotted out, but the very foundation of social order are to be undermined and destroyed. The demon of destruction is to be let loose over the face of the land. A reign of terror and mob law is to prevail in each section of the Union. And the mad who dares to plead for the cause of justice and moderation in either section is to be marked down as a traitor to his section. If the state of things is allowed to go on, how long before you will have the guillotine in active operation? I have struggled almost against hope to avert the calamities of war and to effect a reunion and reconciliation with our brethren of the South. I yet hope it may be done, but I am not able to point out to you how it may be effected. Nothing short of providence can reveal to us the issue of this great struggle, bloody, calamitous. I fear it may be. May we so conduct it, if a collision must come, that we will stand justified in the eyes of him who knows our hearts and who will judge our every act. We must not yield to resentments, nor in the spirit of vengeance, much less to the desire from conquest or ambition. I see no path of ambition open in a bloody struggle for triumph over my own countrymen. There is no path for ambition open for me in a divided country, after having so long served a united and glorious country. Hence, whatever we may do must be the result of conviction, of patriotic duty, the duty that we owe to ourselves, to our posterity, and to the friends of constitutional liberty and self-government throughout the world. My friends, I can say no more. To discuss these topics is the most painful duty of my life. It is with a sad heart, with a grief that I have never before experienced, that I have to contemplate this fearful struggle. But I believe in my conscience that it is a duty that we owe ourselves and our children and our God to protect this government and that flag from every assailant, be he who he may. There are only two sides to this question. Every man must be for the United States of America or against it. There can be no neutrals in this war. Only patriots or traitors.
You now see that Stephen Douglas and I was no longer debating. I wish I'd had a longer time to call on him. That was not meant to be. And on June 3rd, 1861, he breathed his last in Chicago. General Orders 29 was issued, and the usual military format was discarded, and a civilian tone replaced it. I share it with you now in its brevity. War Department, Adjutant General's Office, Washington, June 4, 1861. The death of a great statesman in this hour of peril cannot be regarded otherwise than a national calamity. Stephen A. Douglas expired in the commercial capital of Illinois yesterday morning at 9 o'clock. A representative of the overpowering sentiment enlisted in the cause in which we are engaged. A man who nobly discarded party for his country. A senator who forgot all prejudices in an earnest desire to serve the republic. A statesman who lately received for the chief magistrate of the Union a vote second only to that which the president was elected, and who had every reason to look forward to a long career of usefulness and honor. A patriot who defended with equal zeal and ability the Constitution as it came to us from our fathers, and whose last mission upon earth was that of rallying the people of his own state of Illinois as one man around the glorious flag of our Union, has been called from the scene of life and the field of his labor. This department, recognizing in the loss one common to the whole country, and profoundly sensible of the grief it will excite among millions of men, hereby advises the colonels of the different regiments to have the order read tomorrow to their respective commands, and suggests that the colors of the Republic be craped in mourning in honor of the illustrious dead. Simon Cameron, Secretary of War. Lorenzo Thomas, Adjutant General. Ladies and gentlemen, General Orders 29.
We hope that tonight you've learned a little bit about the history of the Lincoln-Douglas debates and how that history has more importantly shaped our nation, our destiny. We are one nation under God. Mr. Lincoln, would you please finish off tonight's program with some desired words?
are in the 232nd year of our Constitution. Oldest Constitution in the world today. Your world. It took a long time to set up, to accomplish many things. It's taken a long time to finish, but we will continue. It took a long time to set up human slavery. It's taken a long time to destroy it, but destroy it we must. Do not despair. My lifetime was only the tick of a clock in eternity. Yours is the same. I thought my times were the sorest to live in. And you may think the same of yours. But do not lose heart. We've come a long way. We've got much further to go. There is darkness and there's light. We must look away from the one and look to the other. And if we have firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, and we add to that compassion, what other weapons do we need? You have been a most outstanding audience this afternoon, and the judge and I are appreciative.